The stars looked different here. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UE's horizon, watching the swirling colors of the Vega Sector Nebula paint strange shadows across his ship's hull. After 6 months of traveling through empty space, they had finally reached the edge of what Earth's long-range sensors had detected as populated star systems. "Captain, we're picking up something big on sensors," Lieutenant Amy Carter called from her station. Her fingers moved quickly across the control panel, her face serious as she studied the readings. "Multiple ships approaching from the third planet. They're huge, sir. Bigger than anything we've ever built." Jake walked over to look at her screen. The shapes moving toward them didn't look like any spacecraft he had ever seen. They were beautiful in a way that made no sense for military. Vessels. Long flowing curves that seemed to bend light around them, with surfaces that glowed like captured starlight. There were 5 of them, each one at least 3 times the size of the horizon. "Are they hostile?" Jake asked. "I don't think so," Amy replied, checking her instruments again. "They're not targeting us, but they're definitely coming this way. And Captain, there's something else. The energy readings from those ships are off the charts. I've never seen anything like it." Dr. Lisa Hayes looked up from her science station. "The technology must be incredibly advanced. Those energy signatures suggest they can manipulate matter at the molecular level, possibly even atomic level." Jake nodded slowly. This was what they had come out here for. Earth's first contact with alien life. He had dreamed of this moment since he was a child, but now that it was happening, he felt a strange mix of excitement and worry. "Open a channel," he ordered. "Let's say hello." The main screen flickered to life, and Jake felt his breath catch in his throat. The being looking back at him was unlike anything he had imagined. It stood nearly 10 feet tall, with pale blue skin that seemed to glow from within. Its eyes were silver, without pupils, and they seemed to look right through him. Long white hair flowed around its shoulders, like it was floating in water, even though the creature was clearly standing in normal air. When it spoke, its voice came from everywhere at once, filling the bridge with a sound like distant thunder, mixed with music. "Greetings, small ones. I am Archon Veltar of the Celestial Empire. You have entered our sacred space without permission. This is curious, as no species has ever done so before." Jake stepped forward, trying to project confidence he didn't entirely feel. "I'm Captain Jake Morrison of the United Earthship Horizon. We come in peace, seeking contact with other intelligent life." The creature tilted its head, studying Jake with those strange silver eyes. "Earth? This name is not known to us. From what distant corner of our empire do you come?" "We're not from your empire," Jake said carefully. "We come from a system about 40 light years from here. We're explorers." Something flickered across the alien's face. Surprise, maybe, or confusion. "Impossible. All intelligent life in this galaxy serves the Celestial Empire. All kneel before our divine wisdom." Jake felt his crew shifting nervously behind him. There was something in the way the creature spoke that set his teeth on edge. The assumption that everyone should serve them. A casual mention of making people kneel. He had studied enough history to know where that kind of talk led. "Well," Jake said, keeping his voice steady, "we don't kneel to anyone." The Archon's silver eyes widened slightly. "You misunderstand, small one. It is not a choice. Observe." Suddenly, Jake felt something trying to push into his mind. It was like a cold weight pressing against his thoughts, trying to make him think. Different things. He could feel it attempting to make him afraid, to make him want to drop to his knees and beg for mercy. The sensation was uncomfortable, like having someone shine a bright light in his eyes. Jake rubbed his temple and frowned. "Are you trying to give me a headache?" The effect on the Archon was immediate. The creature's glowing skin flickered, and its perfect composure cracked. What what are you? Around the bridge, Jake's crew looked confused but alert. Amy was still monitoring her sensors. Dr. Hayes was taking readings, and Engineer Tom Bradley was checking the ship's systems. No one seemed affected by whatever the alien had tried to do. "We're humans," Jake said simply. "And like I said, we don't kneel." The Archon stepped back, its face showing an emotion Jake couldn't identify. Fear? Anger? This is impossible. Our divine gift has never failed. No mind can resist the will of the Celestials. "First time for everything," Tom called from his station, not looking up from his work. The alien ship's main screen flickered as other figures appeared behind the Archon. They all had the same tall, glowing appearance, but their faces showed clear alarm. Jake could hear them speaking in their musical language, their voices rising with what sounded like panic. "You will remain here," the Archon said, but its commanding tone had changed to something that sounded almost desperate. "The High Council must be informed of this anomaly." "Actually," Jake said, crossing his arms, "we'll go where we please. This is free space, and we're free people." The Archon's form flickered on the screen, and Jake could see other Celestials arguing behind it. Finally, the connection cut, and the 5 alien ships began moving away from the horizon at incredible speed. Amy looked up from her sensors, a small smile on her face. "Captain, they're retreating. All 5 ships are heading back to that third planet as fast as they can go." "Well," Dr. Hayes said, studying her readings, "that was interesting. Whatever they tried to do to us, it definitely didn't work." Jake watched the alien ships disappear into the distance. He had a feeling this first. Contact was going to make waves throughout whatever empire these Celestials had built. For 50,000 years, according to their own words, no one had ever said no to them, but humans had never been good at following rules they didn't make themselves. "Set course for the inner system," Jake ordered. "Let's see what else is out." "Here, and Amy?" "Yes, sir." "Send a message back to Earth. Tell them we've made contact, and it's going to be complicated." The crystal palace of the High Archon floated in the center of Celesta Prime, suspended above the clouds by pure thought. High Archon Zephyros stood in his council chamber, his 12-foot frame towering over the other Celestials who had gathered for this emergency meeting. His skin glowed brighter than the others, a sign of his immense power, and his silver eyes burned with anger. "Explain this to me again," Zephyros said, his voice making the crystal walls vibrate. "A ship full of primitives resisted Archon Veltar's divine command?" Veltar knelt before his leader, something no Celestial had done in front of another species for thousands of years. "My lord, I used the full strength of my abilities. I attempted to plant fear, submission, and worship in their minds. Nothing worked. They acted as if I was doing nothing at all." "Impossible," said Archon Kyra, her flowing robes rippling with energy. "For 50,000 years, no mind has resisted us. We have tested our power on millions of species. Every single one kneels." Zephyros turned to face the great window that looked out over their capital city. Below, millions of alien beings went about their daily tasks, all of them moving with the calm efficiency of the mentally dominated. Saurian reptiles worked in the factories, insectoid hive minds managed the communication networks, and dozens of other species served in perfect harmony because they had no choice. "Show me the recording again," Zephyros commanded. The air in front of them shimmered, and a 3-dimensional image appeared. They watched as Veltar attempted to dominate the human captain's mind, and they saw the man's casual response about headaches. Several of the Celestials shifted uncomfortably at the display. "Look at their faces," Archon Dex pointed out. "The other humans on their ship, none of them show any sign of mental influence. Usually, even when we focus on one individual, others nearby feel some effect. Their technology?" suggested Archon Lyra. Perhaps they have mental shields. I scanned their ship thoroughly, Veltar replied. Their technology is primitive compared to ours. No psionic elements at all. Everything they use is purely mechanical and electronic. Zephyros was quiet for a long moment. Finally, he spoke. Where are these humans now? They ignored our command to remain in place. Their ship has moved deeper into the Vega sector. They appear to be exploring and making contact with our subject. Races. The High Archon's skin blazed brighter. Contact with our subjects? Without permission? Meanwhile, 3 star systems away, the UES Horizon was docked at a massive space station orbiting the planet Kepler 442b. Captain Jake Morrison walked through corridors filled with aliens of dozens of different species, all of them staring at him and his crew with expressions of confusion and fear. Dr. Lisa Hayes stayed close to Jake as they made their way to what appeared to be the station's command center. Captain, I'm reading some very strange brain patterns from these aliens. It's like they're all thinking the same thoughts. What do you mean? Jake asked, nodding politely to a group of tall, thin beings with gray skin and large black eyes. I mean they're literally thinking the same thoughts. Look at their behavior. They move in perfect coordination. They never argue or disagree, and when one of them learns something, they all seem to know it instantly. They reached the command center, where a large reptilian being in what looked like a military uniform was waiting for them. The creature was about 8 feet tall, covered in dark green scales, with intelligent yellow eyes that watched the humans carefully. I am Commander Crix of the Saurian Defense Forces, the alien said in perfect English. I have been ordered to escort you to the Celestial Administrator. Ordered by whom? Jake asked. Commander Crix paused, his yellow eyes blinking slowly. By the Celestials, of course. All orders come from the Celestials. Amy Carter, who had been scanning with her handheld device, looked up at Jake. Captain, this is weird. I'm detecting the same kind of energy signature we saw from the celestial ships, but it's very faint. It's like there's a constant signal being broadcast. Dr. Hayes nodded. I think these people are being controlled. Not just influenced, completely controlled. Jake studied Commander Crix's face. Despite the alien features, he could see something that looked like intelligence trying to break through. Commander, do you ever disagree with the Celestials? The reptilian being's head tilted in confusion. Disagree? I do not understand this word in this context. You never think they might be wrong about something? Crix's eyes went wide, and he took a step backward. Wrong? The Celestials are divine beings. They cannot be wrong. To think such thoughts is... He paused, his forked tongue flicking out nervously. Is not possible? Tom Bradley, who had been quietly working on his scanner, spoke up. Captain, I'm picking up some kind of transmission. It's very low frequency, almost subsonic. It seems to be coming from that big tower in the center of the station. The holy transmitter, Crix said automatically. It carries the blessed thoughts of our celestial masters to all faithful servants. Jake felt his stomach turn. These people weren't just subjects of an empire. They were slaves, controlled by some kind of mental broadcasting system. He looked around at all the aliens going about their tasks with perfect efficiency and no individual expression. Commander Crix, Jake said carefully, what do you want? Not what you're supposed to want, but what do you actually want? The Saurian's eyes began to glow slightly, and he swayed on his feet. I want ... I want to serve the Celestials. I want to obey their divine will. I want... He stopped, his expression becoming confused. I want ... Why do you ask this question? It makes my head feel strange. Dr. Hayes stepped forward with her medical scanner. Commander, may I examine you? I'm a doctor. You may do as the Celestials permit, Crix replied. But Jake noticed the reptilian being didn't move to stop her when she began her scan. "This is incredible," Lisa whispered to Jake as she read her results. His brain shows signs of constant artificial stimulation. There are neural pathways that have been completely rewired. But underneath that, I can see the original pattern, trying to reassert itself. Like he's fighting it? Like part of him never stopped fighting it. At that moment, alarms began blaring throughout the station. Crix straightened up, his eyes going blank again. "Celestial Enforcement Fleet approaching. All subjects will prepare for divine inspection." Through the station's large windows, Jake could see ships approaching. Not 5 this time, but dozens. Each one was larger than the last, and they all had that same flowing, beautiful design that seemed to bend light around them. Amy checked her communicator. "Captain, we're getting a transmission from the lead ship." The image that appeared on the nearest screen made everyone in the command center fall to their knees. Everyone except the humans. This celestial was even taller than the first one, with skin that blazed like a small sun and eyes that seemed to hold the depths of space. "I am High Archon Zephyros," the being said, his voice shaking the entire station. "The immune creatures will surrender themselves immediately for study. Any who harbor them will be punished." Jake looked around at all the aliens kneeling on the floor, their faces filled with terror and worship. Then he looked at his crew, who were all standing straight and looking annoyed rather than afraid. "Well," Jake said to the screen, "that's not going to happen." The High Archon's blazing eyes focused on Jake with an intensity that should have burned him to ash. "You dare refuse a direct command from a celestial deity?" Jake shrugged. "We told your friend before. We don't kneel to anyone, and we sure don't surrender to bullies." For a moment, the entire station was silent, except for the sound of the alarms. Then High Archon Zephyros began to laugh, a sound like breaking crystal mixed with thunder. "Very well, immune ones. You have chosen your fate." The mining world of Kepler 442b had seen nothing but quiet obedience for 3,000 years. Its red soil was rich with rare metals that the Celestials needed for their technology, and millions of alien workers dug deep tunnels every day without complaint. They worked because they had to. Their minds gave them no choice. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the observation deck of the U.E.'s Horizon, watching the planet below. 3 days had passed since High Archon Zephyros had made his threat, and now the human ship hung in space above the mining world, surrounded by the largest celestial fleet anyone had ever seen. 67 ships, Lieutenant Amy Carter reported from her station. "And Captain, I'm reading some kind of massive energy buildup from the lead vessel." Jake nodded. He had been expecting this. After their last conversation, he knew the Celestials would want to make a point. They had ruled this galaxy for 50,000 years by making everyone believe they were gods. Having someone refuse to kneel was probably the worst thing that could happen to them. "Tom, are our weapons ready?" Jake asked. Engineer Tom Bradley looked up from his console. "Railguns are charged and ready, Captain." "But sir, I have to say it again. We're outnumbered more than 60 to 1. "Sometimes being outnumbered is an advantage," Jake replied. "It means the enemy gets overconfident." The main screen flickered to life, showing High Archon Zephyros in all his blazing glory. Behind him, Jake could see other Celestials, their forms glowing with power. The sight of them should have made any normal being fall to their knees in worship. "Humans," Zephyros said, his voice echoing through the bridge. "You have had time to consider your position. Surely you understand that. Resistance is futile. Submit now, and your deaths will be quick." "Counteroffer," Jake said, stepping forward. "You leave these people alone and go back to your homeworld. Live your own lives instead of controlling everyone else's." The High Archon's skin blazed brighter. "Impossible. These lesser beings exist only to serve. Without our guidance, they would destroy themselves. We are their salvation. Funny thing about salvation, Dr. Lisa Hayes said from her science station. Usually the people being saved get to choose whether they want it or not. Silence, Zephyros commanded, focusing his power on Dr. Hayes. His eyes burned like stars as he tried to force her mind to obey. Lisa rubbed her forehead and frowned. Okay, that's definitely giving me a headache now. Could you please stop? The effect on the celestial fleet was immediate. Jake could see the other ships wavering slightly in their formation, as if their crews were confused by what they had just witnessed. Impossible, Zephyros whispered. My power is absolute. I am a god. No, Jake said firmly. You're just a bully with fancy powers. And we've dealt with bullies before. The High Archon's rage filled the screen. Very well. If you will not submit, you will bear witness to divine power. Watch as we reshape this world itself. The transmission cut, and Jake immediately turned to Amy. What are they doing? Energy readings are off the charts, Captain. They're focusing their power on the planet's surface. Through the main screen, Jake watched in horror as the celestial ships began to glow. The combined mental power of dozens of the galaxy's most powerful beings reached down to the planet below. Mountains began to rise from the flat mining areas, lifting slowly into the air. Entire sections of the planet's crust cracked and reformed as the Celestials demonstrated their godlike abilities. On the surface, Jake could see the mining crews, thousands of aliens of different species, all stopping their work to kneel and worship as their masters reshaped the world around them. They're showing off, Tom said, his voice tight with anger. They're terrorizing those people just to make a point. Captain, Amy called out, I'm getting a transmission from the planet. It's coming from the mining station. Put it through. The screen showed Commander Crix, the Saurian they had met before, but something was different about him. His yellow eyes were brighter, more focused, and when he spoke, his voice carried an emotion Jake hadn't heard before. Anger got double quotes, human captain. Crix said, the Celestials are using their power to crush the mining tunnels. Thousands of workers are trapped underground. They do this to show their strength, but my people are dying. Jake felt his jaw tighten. How many trapped? Over 10,000. The tunnels are collapsing faster than we can evacuate them. Jake looked at his crew. He could see the same determination in their faces that he felt in his heart. They were explorers, not warriors, but they were still human. And humans had never been good at watching innocent people suffer. Amy, target those floating mountains with our railguns. Tom, give me full power to weapons. Sir? Tom looked confused. The mountains? Trust me. Jake opened a channel to the celestial fleet. High Archon Zephyros, you want to see what human power looks like? Watch this. The U.E.'s Horizon's railguns fired in sequence, sending tungsten slugs at incredible speeds toward the floating mountains. The projectiles struck with the force of small nuclear weapons, shattering the massive rock formations and sending debris raining down into the empty areas of the planet. The effect on the celestial fleet was immediate. The ships wavered as their crews lost concentration, and Jake could see the confusion on Zephyros's face when he appeared on screen again. Impossible, the High Archon said. Those mountains were held by the power of 12 Celestials. You're primitive. Weapons cannot. Cannon did, Jake interrupted. Impressive party trick, but we've got better toys. For the first time in 50,000 years, celestial technology met human engineering. The battle that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The Celestials threw waves of mental energy at the human ship, trying to tear it apart. With pure thought, Jake felt the hull vibrate as invisible forces tried to crush the horizon like a tin can. But human ships were built to survive in space. where a tiny hole could kill everyone aboard. They were tough, practical, and designed by people who understood that the universe was trying to kill them every second of every day. Their shields are purely psionic, Amy reported as she fired the ship's weapons. They have no protection against kinetic weapons. Then let's give them some kinetic weapons, Jake replied. The Horizon's missiles streaked toward the celestial fleet, followed by railgun rounds that moved too fast for the eye to track. When they struck the beautiful, flowing ships, the results were devastating. The Celestials had never needed to design their vessels for actual combat. They had relied on their mental powers to win battles before they started. "Captain," Dr. Hayes called out, "I'm reading something strange. The aliens on the planet, their brain patterns are changing." Jake looked at the screen, showing the planet's surface. The alien workers were no longer kneeling in worship. Instead, they were standing up, looking around with confusion, and something that might have been hope. The psionic control signals, Tom realized. They're being disrupted by our weapons' fire. No, Zephyros's voice filled the bridge, but it no longer carried the same commanding power. This cannot be. We are gods. We have ruled for 50,000 years, and now your time is over, Jake said firmly. Order your fleet to withdraw, or I'll show you what happens when gods bleed. On the planet below, Commander Crix was running toward the collapsed mining tunnels, but he was no longer moving with the mechanical precision of the mentally controlled. He was running like someone who had just remembered that he had a choice. 3. Celestial ships were already retreating, their crews too shocked by the damage to continue fighting. Jake could see the panic spreading through their formation as they realized their beautiful vessels were not invincible. "This is not over, humans," Zephyros said, but his voice carried fear now instead of arrogance. "You have started something that will consume the entire galaxy." "Good," Jake replied. "It's about time somebody did." As the celestial fleet began its retreat, Jake opened a channel to the mining station. Commander Crix appeared on screen, and, for the first time, the Saurian was smiling. "Human Captain," Crix said, "I remember now. I remember who I used to be before they took my mind. And I remember the word I could not understand before." "What word?" "Freedom." 3 months after the Battle of Kepler 442b, the galaxy was on fire. Not with weapons or explosions, but with something far more dangerous to the Celestial Empire, the spread of an idea. The idea that the gods could bleed. Commander Beth Turner stood on the bridge of the UE Scifiance, the second human ship to reach celestial space. Through her view screen, she could see the orbital factories of Proxima Station, where thousands of alien workers had torn down the massive statues of their celestial masters and were building something new: weapons. Captain Norrison was right. She said to her tactical officer, Lieutenant Dan Cooper, once these people remembered they had a choice, they chose to fight. The rebellion had started small. A few mining crews who refused to go back into the tunnels. Some factory workers who stopped making the devices used to control their own minds. But when news spread that humans had actually damaged celestial ships, the spark became a wildfire. Commander Crix of the Saurians had become the unofficial leader of what the aliens were calling the Liberation Movement. His people's natural warrior instincts, suppressed for thousands of years, had exploded back to life once their minds were freed. They were teaching other species how to fight, how to resist, and how to hope. "Incoming transmission from Earth Command," Dan reported. "Admiral." Kate Sullivan's face appeared on the screen. She looked tired, but her eyes burned with determination. "Beth, we've got a problem. Our deep space sensors are picking up the largest celestial fleet ever assembled. They're heading straight for Earth." Beth felt her blood run cold. "How many ships?" "Over 300. And they're not the same ones you've been fighting. These are bigger, older, and according to our analysis, much more powerful. We think they're bringing their entire leadership. How long do we have? 2 weeks, maybe 3. Beth, I need you to do something that goes against every military principle I know. I need you to abandon the aliens and come home. Beth looked out at Proxima Station, where thousands of newly freed beings were working day and night to build the tools of their liberation. She thought about Commander Crix and the hope in his yellow eyes when he first said the word freedom. With respect, Admiral, I can't do that. Admiral Sullivan's expression softened. I knew you'd say that, which is why I'm sending you reinforcements. Every available ship from Earth, plus some new friends who want to help. The screen split, showing several other vessels approaching Earth. Beth recognized the designs. They were alien ships, but not celestial ones. These looked crude and practical, built by beings who had learned to fight using human tactics. Liberation Fleet, Admiral Sullivan continued. Turns out when you free a few hundred star systems, you make a lot of grateful friends. Commander Crix sends his regards, by the way. He's leading a strike force of Saurian warriors, who are especially eager to meet the Celestials in open battle. Beth smiled for the first time in days. How many ships total? Counting human and alien vessels? About 80. We're still outnumbered almost 4 to 1, but we're not fighting gods anymore, Beth finished. We're fighting bullies who've forgotten how to deal with anyone who fights back. Meanwhile, in the Crystal Palace of Celesta Prime, High Archon Zephyros stood before the assembled might of the Celestial High Council. Every powerful member of their race was present. Their combined mental energy making the air itself glow with power. The infection spreads, Archon Veltar reported, his once proud voice now filled with desperation. 17 star systems have declared independence. The hive minds have broken their mental connections to us. Even some of our blessed administrators are beginning to question our authority. And the humans? Zephyros asked. They move freely through our territory, bringing their immunity to our power wherever they go. Worse, their technology seems to actively disrupt our control signals. Areas where their ships have been remain difficult to influence. Archon Kyra stepped forward, her robes crackling with barely contained energy. My lord, I propose we end this quickly. Take the entire High Council to their homeworld. Combine our power and crush their planet like an egg. Show the galaxy what happens to those who defy gods. And if their immunity extends to planetary destruction, asked Archon Dex, what if our power simply fails against them as it has before? Zephyros was quiet for a long moment. Finally, he spoke. Then we will know once and for all whether we are truly divine or merely powerful mortals who have convinced ourselves we are more than we are. 2 weeks later, the combined human and liberation fleet hung in space around Earth's moon. Admiral Kate Sullivan stood on the bridge of the flagship U.E.'s Constitution, watching as the largest armada in galactic history emerged from hyperspace. The celestial ships were even more magnificent than the previous ones. These were the ancient vessels of the High Council, some of them older than human civilization. They moved through space like living things, their hulls pulsing with inner light, and their very presence making reality seem to bend around them. 312 ships confirmed, reported the sensor officer. And Admiral, the energy readings. They're unlike anything we've ever seen. Kate nodded. She had expected this. The Celestials were making their final play, bringing everything they had to destroy the one race that had ever successfully defied them. All ships, this is Admiral Sullivan. Today, we fight not just for Earth, but for the freedom of every thinking being in this galaxy. The enemy has power we can barely understand, but they have one weakness. They've forgotten that true strength comes not from controlling others, but from choosing to stand together. On the screen, High Archon Zephyros, appeared. His form blazed like a small star, and when he spoke, his voice carried the combined authority of 300 celestial minds. Humans of Earth, you have corrupted our perfect order and infected our subjects with the disease of rebellion. For this crime against the natural order, your world will be unmade. Your species will be erased from existence. Kneel now, and we will make your death swift. Kate stepped forward, her uniform crisp and her voice steady. High Archon, I'm Admiral Kate Sullivan of the United Earth Space Force, and I have a message for you from humanity. She paused, looking directly into those burning silver eyes that had terrified countless species across 50,000 years. Go to hell. The battle for Earth began with the Celestials attempting something they had never tried before: the complete destruction of an entire planet using pure mental power. The combined will of the High Council reached out toward Earth, seeking to tear apart its core and scatter its pieces across space-down. But as their power touched the blue-green world, something impossible happened. The energy simply stopped, as if it had hit an invisible wall, not just around the human ships, but around the entire planet. Impossible, Zephyros whispered, his blazing form flickering. An entire world cannot be immune. Want to bet? Kate replied, then opened fire. The human fleet launched everything they had: nuclear missiles, railgun rounds, particle beams, and weapons that had been designed specifically to fight beings who could manipulate matter with their minds. The Liberation Fleet joined them, alien ships built with human technology and crewed by beings who fought not because they had to, but because they chose to. For the first time in galactic history, the Celestials found themselves in a fair fight. And they discovered something that every bully learns. Eventually, when you've spent your entire existence winning through intimidation, you never learn how to actually fight. The battle raged for hours. Celestial ships, beautiful beyond description, exploded in brilliant flowers of light. Human vessels, ugly and practical, absorbed punishment that should have destroyed them and kept fighting. Alien crews who had been slaves just months before now flew their ships with the fury of the finally free. When High Archon Zephyros died, his death scream echoed across every psionic-sensitive mind in the galaxy. For 50,000 years, his mental voice had been the final authority on all things. Now it was silent forever. As the surviving celestial ships retreated toward their homeworld, Admiral Sullivan opened a channel to the Liberation Fleet. Commander Crix, are you there? The Saurian's scarred face appeared on screen, and he was grinning with all his sharp teeth showing. I am here, Admiral, and I must tell you, today I learned a new human word. What's that? Victory. 6 months after the Battle of Earth, Admiral Jake Morrison walked through the halls of Liberty Station, the new headquarters of the Galactic Coalition. The massive space station had been built where the first psionic control tower once stood, and its halls buzzed with activity as hundreds of different species worked together for the first time in 50,000 years. The war was over. The Celestial Empire had collapsed not with a final battle, but with a whimper. When news of High Archon Zephyros' death reached every corner of the galaxy, the remaining Celestials had simply given up. Some had retreated to their homeworld and never left. Others had scattered to distant systems, trying to live quiet lives. As ordinary beings instead of gods. Jake stopped at a large window that looked out into space. Dozens of ships moved past the station, human vessels working alongside alien craft of every design imaginable. Some were sleek and beautiful, others were crude but effective. All of them flew under the banner of the Coalition, the new government that had replaced the Empire. Admiral Morrison? A voice said behind him. Jake turned to see a young alien approaching. She was one of the Etherians, a species with pale blue skin and large violet eyes. Before the liberation, her people had been forced to work in the celestial communication networks, using their natural telepathic abilities to relay commands across the galaxy. Now she served as a translator for the Coalition. Yes, Sarah? The council meeting is about to begin. Commander Crix asked me to find you. Jake nodded and followed her through the station's corridors. As they walked, he could hear the sounds of a galaxy learning to be free. In one room, Saurian engineers were teaching human technicians how to build better armor. In another, human doctors were working with alien healers to develop new medicines. Everywhere he looked, people were choosing to help each other instead of being forced to serve. The council chamber was filled with representatives from over 200 different species. At the center sat Commander Crix, his yellow eyes bright with intelligence that was no longer suppressed. Beside him was Dr. Lisa Hayes, who had become the Coalition's chief scientist, and Admiral Beth Turner, who now commanded the Joint Defense Fleet. Admiral Morrison, Crix said as Jake entered, "We were just discussing the Centauri incident." Jake took his seat and looked at the reports on his screen. 3 weeks ago, a group of former Celestial administrators had tried to restart their control network in the Centauri system. They had managed to dominate several thousand aliens before a Coalition strike force had arrived to stop them. "How are the freed prisoners?" Jake asked. Dr. Hayes answered, "Physically fine, but the mental damage will take time to heal. We're setting up counseling centers on 12 different worlds to help beings who are experiencing freedom for the first time. Some of them are having trouble making even simple decisions after centuries of mental control. And the administrators?" "In custody," Admiral Turner replied. "The question is what to do with them. Some of the liberated species want them executed. Others think we should try to rehabilitate them." Jake looked around the room at the faces of beings from across the galaxy. 6 months ago, most of them had been slaves. Now they were making decisions about justice, mercy, and the future of their civilization. "What does the law say?" he asked. "That's the problem," said Counselor Vex, a tall insectoid being whose species had once managed the Empire's legal system. "The only laws we had were celestial laws, which basically said they could do whatever they wanted. We're having to create an entirely new system. Then we take it slow," Jake decided. "We hold trials, we listen to evidence, and we let the liberated species decide what justice looks like. But we do it fairly, even for our former oppressors." Crix nodded approvingly. "This is why the humans lead this coalition. You think about what is right, not just what feels good." After the meeting, Jake walked with Dr. Hayes through the station's recreation area. It was one of his favorite places because it showed him what they had really accomplished. Alien children of dozens of species played together, laughing and running without fear. Their parents watched from nearby, still amazed that their children could play instead of work. "I got a message from Earth today," Lisa said. "They're planning to send out 20 more exploration ships this year. The galaxy is so much bigger than we ever imagined." "Any word from the celestial homeworld?" "Some. They single quotes adapting. Apparently, learning to live without mental dominance is harder than they expected. They're asking for help with basic things, like agriculture and manufacturing. Turns out when you can just make other people do everything for you, you forget how to do it yourself." Jake smiled. "Are we going to help them?" "Of course. That's what the coalition is for." They reached the end of the recreation area, where a memorial wall listed the names of all the beings who had died fighting for freedom. Human names were mixed with alien ones, because the liberation had belonged to everyone who chose to stand up against tyranny. "Admiral," a small voice said. Jake looked down to see a young Etherian child, no more than 6 years old. She was holding a drawing she had made with colorful crayons. "What's this?" Jake asked, kneeling down to her level. "It's my family," the child said proudly. "That's my mom, and that's my dad, and that's my little brother. And that's our house." On New Etheria, Jake studied the drawing. It showed 4 stick figures standing in front of a simple building under a yellow sun. It was the kind of picture any human child might draw, except for one thing. None of the figures were kneeling. "It's beautiful," Jake said. "What are they doing?" "They're being happy," the child replied, as if this was the most obvious thing. In the world, Jake felt his throat tighten with emotion. This was what they had fought for. Not glory or territory or revenge, but the simple right of a child to draw her family being happy. "Admiral Morrison to the bridge," came a voice over the station's communication system. Jake stood up and ruffled the child's hair gently. "Keep drawing, okay?" On the bridge, Admiral Turner was waiting with a report. "We've got 3 new systems requesting to join the coalition. All of them were on the outer rim of celestial space, so they never had much contact with the Empire. They want to trade with us and share technology. Any problems? Just one? They keep asking if we're going to be their new rulers." Jake laughed. "And what do you tell them? That we don't rule anyone. We just help people rule themselves." "Good answer." Jake looked out at the stars through the bridge windows. Somewhere out there, billions of beings were going to sleep tonight without fear of having their thoughts controlled in the morning. Children were learning that they could choose their own paths in life. Artists were creating beauty instead of propaganda. Scientists were exploring the universe instead of building better chains. "Admiral," the communications officer called out, "we're getting a priority message from the exploration ship U.E.'s Pioneer. They've made contact with a new species in the Andromeda sector." "Are they friendly?" "Unknown, sir. But Captain Wilson reports that they seem to be ruled by a military dictatorship that uses advanced technology to control their population." Jake sighed. Apparently, the galaxy had more than one group of bullies who needed to learn about freedom. "Send a message." "To Captain Wilson," Jake ordered. "Tell him to proceed carefully, offer friendship instead of demands, and remember that sometimes the best way to help people is to show them that there's another way to live." "Yes, sir." "Should I also tell him that backup is available if needed?" Jake thought about that young Etherian child in her drawing of a happy family. He thought about Commander Crix learning the word freedom for the first time. He thought about all the beings across the galaxy who are finally able to choose their own destiny. Tell him that the coalition stands ready to help anyone who wants to be free, but also tell him that freedom is something people have to choose for themselves. We can't force it on them. Even if they're suffering under oppression, Jake smiled, we can offer them hope. We can show them what's possible. And we can be there to help when they decide they've had enough of being told to kneel. As Liberty Station continued its orbit around the liberated world below, Jake Morrison looked out at the stars and felt something he had never expected when he first left Earth: pride. Not in conquest or dominance, but in the simple fact that humanity had found its place in the galaxy, not as rulers, but as friends to anyone brave enough to stand up and choose freedom. The galaxy no longer obeyed anyone like deities. It belonged to all its children equally, just as it should have from the beginning.